My name is Will, and I, like Mulder from the X-Files, want to believe. So I've embarked on a journey of discovery. I've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical worlds. I've thrown myself into weird and wonderful experiences. I've even joined a coven of witches, all in the interest of finding something, anything, that will prove that there's something beyond this physical, three-dimensional world we all live in. This is the Skeptic Metaphysician. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Skeptic Metaphysician. Karen, I think I need to change that cadence. It's like the same thing every show.
It is, and it's kind of round.
Well, you know, I am kind of round.
Well,
that's kind of my
your thing.
It's my personality, baby. Well, Karen, I'm excited to have you back on the show. It's been a couple of days, a couple of weeks that you abandoned me to my own wiles. Never a good thing to leave me on my own.
Oh, I think you did just well on your own.
Well, I appreciate that, but you haven't heard the shows yet. Just wait. Well, I'm excited today, as I am always, but this time I'm really super excited because we're going to talk today about a topic that not only do I not know anything about, but I didn't even know was a thing until this next guest reached out to us. What do you know about Thai Buddhist magic?
That would be a resounding 0.
And that would make two of us. So this is perfect. We are coming into this completely cold, as I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience are. So it's going to give us a lot to talk about.
But there is one thing that I do know, and that is that I'm very excited to hear you try to pronounce some of these terms.
All right. So full disclosure, in the interest of that, I have no idea how to pronounce some of these things. I did ask our guest for the pronunciations, and I did write them down
Got a
phonetically.
tutorial. Yes.
I did, but there's no guarantees I'll still say them correctly. So I mean this in absolute no disrespect. I'm a heathen that doesn't know how to pronounce these things, and it makes me sad because I'm really super intrigued by it all. So please bear with me. Let me go ahead and introduce our guest because I think he's sitting back going, oh my gosh, okay, are they ever going to stop talking? So our next guest has years of experience and training with inner door secrets of Thai Buddhist magic. That starts us off right on the right foot, right?
I love it.
After he became a Mophi in Theravada tradition, I forgot to ask him how to say that. I hope I did not butcher that, but we'll find out in a second. After he became a Mophi in Theravada tradition, he then had the privilege of studying under Rinpoches and Lamas from Bonpo Tibetan lineage, where he became a Lama through initiation. Karen, you are laughing. I'm saying these right?
You are. Yes, you are.
Okay.
And you're trying so hard. It's very sweet. So
Well,
just make
I
me
mean,
kind of giggle inside and a little bit on the outside.
It's important. I want to be respectful.
It is. Absolutely.
Now, in continued learning, he's now a formal student in the, Mao Shan sect of Taoism under High Priest Yang in Malaysia. But wait, there's more. Just when you thought you know everything you need to know about our next guest, he's also happens to be a high priest in a Wiccan coven. And he studied Norse magic. He became a master hypnotist under the guidance of the Shambhala Institute. And he's a passionate practitioner in the Fukyuan Tuan. Wow, I know I butchered that one. I'm so sorry. And a Seshem level Reiki master, among many other titles. Needless to say, this gentleman is very magical.
And I have to say, just, we see him on screen right now. And after that description, you would think he's going to be like 78 or something. And he is not at all. He is very accomplished at a younger than you would expect age to be so accomplished.
It's very, truly, truly impressive. This young gentleman by the name of Sadhu Dah is our next guest on the show. Sir, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I am so sorry if I ruined any of those terms.
You actually got Fukyuan Tuan correct.
Hey!
Did I really? You just made my day.
You
Awesome.
worried that you butchered it, but you got it correct.
I was very worried. So thank you for your coaching and for your patience and your understanding in my attempts at saying these names. But most of all, thank you for coming on the show because this is a topic we've not touched on before. And it's super intriguing because I don't know anything about it. So, I mean, let's just level set. Talk to us about Thai Buddhist magic. What is it? How did you get into it? And how does it differ from all the other types of magic out there?
What Thai Buddhist magic is actually isn't Buddhist at all if we're going to split hairs on it. So it originates from Siam, which is what modern day Thailand is now. But in Siam, pre-14th century, you had a lot of animist traditions, very similar to the nature practices of a lot of, what we would call shamanism of various different indigenous tribes and cultures. And in these animistic traditions, they had what were known as different wicha, which were magical systems. So to give you a brief example of one, a hun peon or hun peon is a robot guardian. So they were often made from the straws of basically grass and different like auspicious or like special woods. And they would construct this using a specific wicha, certain kata, chants, incantations, and lunar and solar cycles to create a magical spiritual robot. So a little guardian that in, let's say if you're going by like Wicca traditions, you have like, these bottles that are supposed to be like witch bottles that'll take like a hit or like receive damage and then the bottle will break. So this is the Thai equivalent would be the Hun Peon. And it's this
Mm.
little figure. And,
Right.
they're made in all
Judaism,
kind of different ways.
sorry, I believe the Kabbalah talks about golems, right?
Yes.
That do the same thing. So,
Very similar, very similar. So we have these different wicha, which a lot of them were passed down in oral tradition. So they're not written down per se. And what's sad is a lot of these styles of magic are slowly being lost as we modernize, such as the path of the Lersi or the Ruisi, which are these hermit sages that live mostly in like the northern forest tribe areas. And they're kind of like very interesting in their own way because they wear vests that are made from tiger fur, and they use a lot of plant magic and a lot of charm magic, and they follow these sages, these Lersi. And so they have a very specific flavor, but there's like maybe less than 20 genuine Lersi alive today, and none that are accomplished enough in that path to be able to pass on and teach the genuine old traditions. So the Lersi are something that we're going to see in the next coming decades as being a thing of the past. It's dying out. There's no one to learn that anymore. But with the Thai Wicha specifically, you have these animist traditions that basically kind of ties in with the Burmese a concept of Nat worship. And what Nats were these spirits of the land that they would often ascribe to like coconuts. And so it would be very strange because you would see these people like offering, these incense and candies and things and talking to these coconuts. And it's like, okay, like, this is a little bit odd. I'm not too familiar with it. But in
now,
actuality, the
like
coconuts,
full coconuts,
yeah, like
full
a whole
coconuts, or like carved coconuts, just like the
no,
shell.
it's like a whole coconut.
Huh.
Oh, wow.
And so this would become like a dwelling, like a home for the gnat. And they would call these gnats. And the reason why they gave the term gnat originating was because gnats would, when they do these offerings and stuff, the flies would come and they would eat the food, and they would say these are the spirits of the gnats eating the food, consuming the food. Now, whether you wanted to go in depth on that or not is like irrelevant, but that's like that practice and how it relates to like, the pre 14th century aspect of Siam magic. So then you had the king of Thailand around the 14th century at that point had decided that we're going to be Buddhist now. And that's what, Theravada Buddhism is. This is Thailand. That's a form of Buddhism. It's very specific to Thailand, just like Soto Zen is Chinese. Mahayana, Vajrayana come more like you see those in Cambodia, Malaysia, Vietnam, places like that. And then Tibetan Buddhism is its very own thing, which is Bonpo. And so Bonpo actually predates all forms of Buddhism. Bonpo is the oldest form of Buddhism. It was Buddhism before it was ever called Buddhism. And this is where it gets a little bit weird. Bonpo is said to come from masters that come from, I think it was like the 125th or something dimension. So like, I mean, more than we could possibly comprehend. I mean,
I
these,
can't comprehend more than three. I can't
right.
imagine
Yeah.
25.
So these masters came down and they were said to have like emerald and crystalline bodies, and they would touch these masters who became masters who were already practicing some sort of like animistic type of traditions, and they became enlightened, and then they taught them this system of Bonpo. And so Bonpo is, if you talk about the Dalai Lama, the tradition that the Dalai Lama belongs to would be the Bonpo tradition. It would be Tibetan Buddhism. And so a lot of these different types of Buddhism, they're all kind of going towards the same path working, and that is using the mind and body to attune to a more crystallized consciousness, very similar to yoga and Vedic traditions. And what we're doing with that is we are learning how to maintain the body, we're learning how to actually use the body, and thus we can build a body when it comes to like magic. Magic's merely a distraction on the path of enlightenment, but it can be a fun distraction. The Buddha even said this.
That's really interesting because I spent some time in Tibet years ago. And I remember going to Lhasa, and there's a temple, I guess. It's been a while. But the way that the people were, I don't want to say worshiping, but whatever you want to call it, it involved their whole body, where they would, at all ages, get down, just lay down flat, get back up, and then walk for ways and then do it again. And they would make this kind of procession around the temple, stopping, every, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 steps to lay down, get back up, and then keep walking. It was really interesting.
That's called prostrating.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But
Now,
I hadn't seen it like in motion or, as part of like a whole thing. It was fantastic.
yeah. I've heard of what you just said before. I've heard that the magical aspects become a distraction when the enlightened yogis actually, it's a nuisance to them. The miracles that are able to perform levitation, all that kind of stuff. In the yogi tradition, which I assume is very different though than what you're talking about. So I want to kind of clarify. When people think magic, at least here, right, in this country, magic, you think of a top hat and a cape and an assistant, and he pulls his top hat out and pulls a rabbit out of it and does a magic wand, that kind of thing. This is not what we're talking about here, right? Magic with a CK is very different than what the illusions that we are subjected to in this country, right? It's a lot more spiritual in nature, right? Can you shed some light into the differences?
Some of these magical practices that we are performing, all it is a place marker for an internal state and aligning to an internal state. And what I mean by that is when we have these fetish objects and totems and these things that we're working with, these rituals that we're constructing and creating, we're actually using that as a physical marker to get us into a specific state of consciousness, samadhi or samadhi, depending on which Eastern concept you're going by, these altered states of higher consciousness. Now, when you're able to tie to specific things in those states, certain effects will blossom and happen. And as such, you'll be able to do the magic. Now, when we're talking about a mysticism approach, which is what you're talking about with yoga, I had wrote something down yesterday that kind of came to me in a meditation. And it's really funny because I didn't really understand why this would be relevant, but now I do understand. So this came to me in my meditation last night, and now I see why it came to me. What people call mysticism isn't all that mysterious. Really, it's just a spectrum of awareness. Through that awareness, we can tap into other realms and dimensions by shifting our perspective on that spectrum. The way of doing that just boils down to learning how the body and mind work. It's not some elaborate secret, and we often overcomplicate things because we approach it as mysticism and magic and not as a spectrum of awareness that we can direct our focus across. Most people marvel at the paranormal because they don't understand the phenomena. But if your awareness was such that you just saw it as an apple on a table, you would look at it and say, oh, it's just an apple. Further inspection could tell you what kind of apple, how it tastes and feels, and further inspection would tell you where to get more apples or even how to grow them.
Wait a second.
That just came to you.
I was just going to say that. These are your words that just came to you during a meditation.
Yeah, sometimes
Fantastic.
like paragraphs of thought will just stream, and a lot of times I'll ignore them. But sometimes I'll admit I'll get a little distracted and I'm like, oh, hold on a second. And then I'll focus on it and then I'll write it down.
I mean, that is astoundingly profound. I mean, I've never heard it explained that way, and it makes perfect sense. That's amazing.
I was in a state of higher consciousness when that came to me. So, I mean, it's not the way I normally think. It was me attuned to a higher state, able to
Right.
receive an understanding that was deeper.
Which exactly proves the exact point you were just saying in the statement that came to you. I mean, that is amazing, and exactly the kind of thing that I really want to happen to me. But because I want it so badly, it doesn't come.
One of my masters, he's one of the high Rinpoches, and it's really funny because I was at the same place he was when he started in his journey. And what that place was, we were talking a little bit the other day, and it came up, cities like supernatural abilities, psychic abilities, powers like levitation, things of that nature. And he said, when I was, much younger, I wanted to learn all of these practices so that I could develop these psychic abilities. But then as I started learning the practices, that just kind of the want and desire to learn those things just shed away. And then all of a sudden I started developing supernatural abilities. And that is kind of like a common thread is there's three schools of thought. Essentially, there's people who just want to attain the enlightenment aspect of it, the crystallized consciousness. There's people who know that to achieve that, they have to do these practices that are likely going to develop some sort of supernatural ability, and that kind of excites them. And then there's people that are solely trying to develop the abilities. What's funny is a lot of times the people who are just trying to develop the supernatural abilities, once they end up developing them, they no longer care about them because they've attained a state. And that state makes those abilities possible. So the psychic abilities, the best way I describe it is they're completely irrelevant. They don't matter at all. You might think they do before you attain such a state where those things are possible. But once you attain that state, you realize that's actually much more profound, so much greater than any sort of side effect, because that's what my master refers to them as. It's a side effect. You take a medication and there's always a list of side effects, right? And you might not necessarily get one of them. You might get all of them. You might get one that this other guy doesn't get. But, we know that side effects are a possibility anytime we take a medication. So when we take this spiritual medicine, when we are healing ourselves, attaining and aligning in a profound way towards a crystallized consciousness, we find that it just kind of happens. And sometimes you might end up developing the ability to master a fire witch and be able to conjure flames. But that's not the whole point of it. The whole point is to have that state, that higher elevated state.
All right. Wait a second. Conjuring fire is a thing?
Yes, I once met a monk who had a water witch, and what this water witch mastery was. So he would put his hands together in a prayer position, and he would meditate for some time, and then he would put his hands outward, and no sleeves, no tricks, and droplets of water would start pouring out of his hand and would come down the fingertips, and just like a little stream. And then, and he would let this water bless people, or he would let them lick at the fingertips and receive this blessed water. And then he would close his hands. The dribble would stop. He'd put it back to his heart, and his hands would be dry.
How much water?
I mean, we're talking about not like overflowing and pouring, but enough to definitely not be considered sweat. Dribbling,
Wow.
a small little stream.
Oh my gosh. That's
Okay.
wild.
All right. Hang on. You know where I'm going to go here, right? So, yeah, how? Like, how? I can't.
So
I mean, you said he had no sleeves.
yes. So if you want to go into the how, I'll actually explain the how to you, but you're likely not going to understand it because you don't understand the science behind it. So we have what's called a type of witch known as the 32 body part kata. And the 32 body part kata breaks down every aspect of the human body, the spit, the hair, the liver, the kidneys, your bones, sinews, all of it, right? And so with this meditation, we are focusing on the living human body rotting and dying. And we are focusing on every part of it rotting and dying. And this puts us into a ghost like state. And this was often performed back in the day in graveyards or even in like a mortuary type setting, which is what we would call it today, but essentially around decomposing human bodies. And so you would attain to the state of your own living body decomposing as you're hyper focused on an actual decomposing body. And this takes you to a state of impermanence. So you're actually focusing on life and death at the same time in a metaphorical and literal sense. And by doing that, then you're able to break down the specific components of this life energy. So you're able to, I'm talking going on to like a quantum level where where you're looking at beyond just how cells communicate with each other, but the space in between that, the actual communication as it would be. And so this is how we create a lot of like pray statues, Prai, spirit statues using like human ghost and various different like the Takian dryad spirits, like banana tree spirits and like different types of devas or like heavenly deities, how we call them, how we create them, how we build, you know, these totem objects that we'll work with, right? So so the 32 body kata and ritual and meditation, there's a bunch of, you know, aspects to it. Like I said, it's a wicca. So it's an entire magical system based on this one concept, which is the 32 body part. And so one of those aspects of it, which ties into what this monk was doing, the science behind that is he tapped into the Namapata. The Namapata is a kata, which is the mastery of 4 elements. And if you wanted to go like even deeper with that, you have like the Abo Kasanan, Wayo Kasanan, you know, and like you, like there's these entire branching systems of magic. Okay. So this Namapata is an ascription of the 4 different elements and the body parts related to that. So within the Namapata, he had mastered one of the 4. And then in that, like one of 4 that he mastered, there's specific body parts. So he had perfect communication and meditation and harmony between those specific body parts tied to the water element and was able to tap into the source of water in his body. And the majority of our composition is water. So thus he was able to send his own life force out as water. So that's the how.
Right? But how does someone get to the level of consciousness where they can tap into this kind of thing? Like, is Thai Buddhist magic, is that just contemplative meditation? Is it actual? I know you mentioned that you have rituals and things that you perform to focus to lock in your intentions, but what, like, if I wanted to not necessarily have water come out of my hands, but achieve a level of consciousness that would get to that point, even though we're not talking about supernatural powers, but get to the point where those side effects happen. How do you go about doing that? I mean, I'm sure many, many, many years of study, but what kind of studies?
So one of the first things that we would study would be, you know, like a very simple one that anybody could actually walk away with today after hearing this and be able to start practicing, which will build and it will become incredibly powerful if you put practice into it. This is the common thread that I've found with every master I've studied under, and even with my own practices, is this takes years. There is no shortcut. This literally takes years to develop. And one of the very simple meditations, but should not be underestimated just because it's simple, is a walking meditation. And the walking meditation is like, you ever seen military soldiers that are at parade rest? So they have the hands behind the back like this, right? Hands kind of
Yep.
clasped. In parade rest, you have, you know, the hands behind the back like that. So just resting on the lower back and you'll just be standing there. So in this walking meditation, we have the hands essentially at parade rest, and we are taking steps forward, keeping our body in good posture and alignment. And now here's the critical key here. You are going to simply put your awareness, and it's very, very simple. It sounds harder than it is, but it's actually very, very simple. So you just put your awareness to the bottom of your heel as your heel steps down, feeling every tendon, every cell, like the skin, the bone, all of it, just focusing your consciousness, just focusing your awareness as the heel goes down all the way till the foot touches at the tip and then comes up with the other foot going down. And so this back and forth, just this regular walking motion, but feeling and being aware of every step, every minutia of movement as you're walking, all the way up the electrical impulses firing up your leg to the brain even sending those impulses. And so it may very well start with just focusing on feeling your feet as they walk, but it'll eventually build to you're feeling the impulse firing from the brain, telling the foot to walk, and the very motion of the foot walking. You're completely connected. And in this state of just samadhi, really, this elevated consciousness. So that's a walking meditation. It's very, very simple. Anybody can do it, but it takes practice to develop it to a very high level. And you can walk around, you can go to the mall and you can go and do things and be meditating the whole time.
So you can have your shoes on when you're doing this.
Yes. Yes, you can.
Oh, okay. I just figured you need to be barefoot. Okay. Well, good.
You might have a
More
better time
accessible.
developing sensitivity barefoot, but
Mhm.
you can definitely do it with shoes on.
So then you are adept at lots of different things, right? We've been talking about one particular aspect of what your expertise is in, but you are also a Reiki master. You're also studied Norse magic, hypnotherapy. Was one practice not enough?
Yeah, I love to learn and I love to experience. And it was never supposed to go to where it got. I started to learn one thing and then I became proficient in it. And then I got more curious about something else and I would put it down and I'd go to something else. And then I'd eventually find that in something new that I was doing, it related to something else. So then I'd go back and I'd pick that thing back up again. And it was just like, kind of across the board, leveling things up and picking up new things and then coming back and leveling things. And it just, before I realized it, I'd become proficient in so many different things, but they were all related. And I just didn't know that when I was learning the new things.
So how is hypnotherapy related? And I think I have an idea, but I want you to tell me.
So hypnotherapy actually comes from the ancient Vedic Vedanta sleep temples of the ancient seers of India. And this was thousands of years ago. And you would have these prophets who would go and honestly, what they were using was if we're going to use a Western terminology, they were using neurolinguistic programming. They were using NLP, conversational hypnosis, and giving these cues and anchors to trigger delta state or coma state in these seers who were these women that were often very beautiful virgins, and they were considered to have this purity. And so they would go into this sleep like dream state and they would be able to predict wars. They would be able to predict things that would come to pass and tell people's futures. And a lot of people would come to these seers to have their fortunes told. And all this really was just hypnotherapy. And they were tapping into a very deep state of higher consciousness. But when we're working with hypnotherapy, you see, in the Western sense, what we're doing is we're communicating with the subconscious mind. Now, what's interesting when you introduce the mysticism and magic to it, because the Western traditions of hypnotherapy today are just one component of an entire system. And so once you learn how to communicate with the subconscious mind, well, then you realize you just learned how to access the fourth dimension. And through accessing the fourth dimension, that's where we are able to manifest with imagination, with play, real tangible things that can manifest in reality. So we have to learn how to engage with our imagination to know that the color, vibration, and frequency that we're using to communicate with the subconscious mind can become something tangible, which can then have an outward reflection and simply become.
So, Will, you're going to laugh at my question. You probably know what it is. So, I struggle with meditation. I'm tried it off and on several times and I just can't stop thinking. Can someone use hypnosis to help someone learn how to meditate?
Yes, I mean, that is definitely a thing, but I would more so recommend, a lot of people have a misconception of how meditation should be. And what was really a struggle for me in the beginning was any kind of stillness meditation, any kind of sitting meditation. And I think most of my students have the same issue. And that is why I get them doing Qigong. So, like, think of Tai Chi, right? So, Tai
Love
Chi
Qigong.
comes from Qigong. Tai Chi is a meditation. It's a very deadly form of martial art, but it is also at its core and root a very powerful meditation that can crystallize your consciousness and evolve you and bring you to enlightenment. See, the Bodhi, he once said that martial arts is just for you to learn to survive long enough to attain enlightenment. So it's something that will lead you to there, but it'll also protect and defend your life force as well while you're trying to attain enlightenment. So I would understand that some of my practices like Fukyan Chuan, which at its higher levels is really like mastering Qi and playing with Qi. So Qigong, Fukyan Chuan, which has a lot of Qigong in it, and Tai Chi, these elements of moving practices. This would be where I would start if I were you. That would probably be something that would get you more to feeling what you think meditation should feel like. So that would be my advice.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually do have some history with. I had a master who actually combined the two into one long set of movements and loved it. I mean, absolutely loved it. Have way fallen out of it in a long time ago, and I've been looking for it since then. But all I'm finding is the old folk, the repeating the same movement over and over and over again, which that's not really what I'm looking for.
I will actually give a rare invite to anyone that is interested in that specifically. And that would be, so one of my masters has decided to finally stop being a hermit, and he is taking on students for the first time in almost 10 years. And I was his only student for like that previous 10 years. So it's very exciting for me because I'm like, oh, y'all are going to get your stuff messed up so hardcore and you don't even know it. So if anyone is interested in reaching out to me, whether it be for my own teachings and things, or to get in contact with my master to learn the Qigong specifically, that's what he would teach is the Qigong. I would definitely give that information.
Well, that would be
Thank you.
amazing. And anything that you give to us, any links or any way to get in contact with you specifically, we'll certainly add to our show notes so people can go directly to the show notes and click a direct link to it. So it makes it easy. Incredibly wonderful offer. And that's it makes me very excited. The big question is that not only does this show go out across the United States, but it's also on several radio stations outside of the US. It's in UK and Ireland specifically. So if someone was interested, I mean, these classes, are they in-person classes? Are they done by long distances? How does that work? Is it retreats that you get together in? Like how would that work?
I actually have 9 students in Japan in Totobayashi City in the Gunma-ken province, and I have never met them in person. And I have done very, very powerful ritual work for them. I have taught them energy healing. I have been teaching and doing so much with them, and the distance has not made a single difference.
Wow.
Well, that just went from great to great. These meditations, I know Qigong, I know how that works, but some of the meditations that you're talking about that help you to crystallize your consciousness. I'm a layperson, right? So I'm assuming that this you're talking about meditating for 18 hours a day. Is that accurate or no?
You don't need to do that. You really don't need to do that. Been there, done that, but you don't need to. And that's so. I'll share with you one of the practices that I do, which is part of my sadhana, daily spiritual practice, is I do a Simha Kriya when I wake up in the morning. And Simha Kriya is like a pranayama. There's a lot to it, but essentially you're holding the tongue out, and then you're doing 21 breaths, and you'll do 21 breaths like you're panting like a dog, right? And then we're stimulating very specific meridians, like it's the whole thing behind it. And then you do 21 breaths with the tongue at the roof of the mouth with teeth baring. And then you'll want to do this sitting down because you'll get very, very high. You'll get very lightheaded. And then you take in a deep breath, and then you're going to hold your fist. You're going to hold tension in your shoulders, your jaw tighten, your feet. Everything is just going to be balled up tight. And you're going to hold that and pressurize your chest. And you're just going to hold it as long as you comfortably can. Some people with advanced breath control can do it for well over 2 minutes. Some people only for a few seconds. It doesn't matter. So then when you naturally feel the impulse to breathe, you exhale and you just keep your eyes closed and you relax in the stillness. And you, with little practice doing this technique, just as I described, you can experience what the Japanese refer to as mushin, which is a state of no mind. which is a very, very profound state of samadhi known as nothingness itself. So when people think of like a term like the word void, right? That sounds kind of scary, kind of dark, abysmal even. Well, actually collapsing into the void is a very beautiful, beautiful, beautiful feeling. So imagine being completely aware of everything happening right now, like this conversation, what's in your room around you, but there's no thought in your mind. Everything is like pitch black. Nothing is happening at all, but you are immersed in everything. Kind of hard to describe, but it is
Mm,
a very beautiful feeling. It's a very peaceful place to be. And then when you simply want to come out of it, you just open your eyes. So you can do the
right.
Simha Kriya and make that your only practice and do it as many times as you want, or even just once a day. And I can assure you that if you do it over a period of time, you yourself will notice gradual change and growth. It's undeniable. It's science.
So, Karen,
I'm in.
but I was going to say, yeah, I'm a skeptic, right?
Yep.
I will tell you that I have experienced the void. I have. And the way that I did it, honestly, was with hypnotherapy. I didn't do it with the kriyas that you're talking about. It was a hypnotherapist who was trying to teach us how to access parts of our mind that we didn't normally access. And when I allowed myself to go where he took me, it was exactly as he describes. It was complete nothingness, but in complete bliss and connected to everything. I'm totally going to contact you because I want to feel that again.
How have you not told me about this?
I I am a
How many
man.
years?
I'm a man full of secrets.
Every day there's something new. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
No, it is. And honestly, I do meditate every morning.
Yeah.
And that is the feeling that I'm trying to achieve. And I've never, I think I did it once when I first started, what is it, 2 years ago, back in earnest. When I first started meditating, I did fall back into it a few times. And it was, I mean, delicious is really the only way to put it. Obviously, not in flavor, not in taste, but it was so blissful and so amazing that there were times where I just didn't want to end the practice. So my practice extended, even though I've only tried to do 10, 20 minutes a day. But, daily life gets in the way. And after a while, you don't, it's more and more difficult to achieve that kind of state. So it leads me to my next question. Like, what must your life be like on a daily basis? I mean, you're surrounded by the magics, by these mysteries that we don't really think about in this country, but yet in the East, it seems that it's just permeated. It's part of their culture, and it certainly seems like it's part of yours. So, what is a day in the life of Sadhu Dah? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the first thing that I do is I do a little bit of, my breathing practice. And I'd say actually that's not true. The first thing I do is when I'm in bed and I wake up, before I start letting, the rush of thoughts of what I need to do that day, thinking about going to the bathroom or if I'm hungry or anything, I allow myself to take a few seconds. I allow myself to just lay there and just be aware. And then I will get up and then I will do a little bit of breathing practice after. And when I say a little bit, I mean like maybe a minute to 2 minutes, but it's very profound for me. The length of time is not really relevant. It's the level of, profoundness. So you go into a very deep state of samadhi and I'll have like my breakfast. And then I come over to my altar right here where I have all these spirit statues, and you can see like the cookies and the drinks and the stuff on there. And if it's a Tuesday or a Saturday, then I need to change out the food offerings dependent upon if they've consumed all the matter or not. And so I will change out offerings. I'll light incense. I'll do my Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samasam Buddhasa. So I'll do that mantra, and I'm essentially giving thanks to enlightened beings, giving thanks to the one who created, found the way, and giving thanks to the way. So that's essentially the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So I'm giving thanks to that. And then I'm sharing my merit, my good deeds with my spirits on my altar, because some of the spirits I have on my altar, they're ghost, so they're still in a state of suffering, regardless if they're well taken care of, they still suffer. So I share my good deeds, my good karma with them. And in return, they help me, they do stuff for me. So it's a very mutually beneficial arrangement. And then I will kind of like look at my calendar, see what I have going on for the day. And then I try to like communicate and touch base with one of my masters and just kind of like get my, bearing of like fortune for the day and check in with clients and students. And then I just kind of go about my day. In the evenings, like I'll work on amulets and talismans, painting them, consecrating them. I watch Netflix and Hulu. I play video games. Like I'm a regular human being, you know. I have sex. I eat food. I mean, I do have magic and mysticism is a big part of my day. But make no mistake, I still enjoy very regular things, and I think we all should, because grounding is important.
Mhm.
You have said so much. Just casually drop these things on us and then just move on as if wasn't something that just made us go, "What did he just say?" Like,
That's
just
just my life.
well, but the casual way in which you drop that these beings actually, you offer them your karma and they help you by doing things, and it depends on whether how much they've consumed of the offerings. What? What?
I guess, in a Western mindset, mostly, some of these things like either seem odd or are downright confusing. But, I'll explain to you very briefly why I need to feed these spirits on a weekly basis. So if I don't feed the spirits, they are not getting sustenance from the offering, right? So where are they going to get sustenance from? A living source. Yes, I have spirits that will literally consume me and eat me if I do not give them offering.
What?
But
Where? What?
Doesn't sound
but the
pleasant.
solution is easy. How hard is it to put out a couple of cookies and crackers and maybe a jar of beans? How hard is that? It's not very hard at
But
all, is it?
but you're talking about like the cookies. You wake up one morning and there's a bite taken out of it. I mean, how does it how do
That's
they
pretty
consume?
rare. That has happened, but that is pretty rare. I once did a very weird ritual with a bunch of Jin Middle Eastern genies, and I had like this basket of bread, and literally one of the pieces of bread like levitated in the air. And when I was staring at the bread that was levitated in the air, the rest of the basket was completely empty. And there's like a bunch of bread in there. So I mean that does happen,
What?
but that's very, very rare.
Wow.
You need a lot of certain elements to create the right setting for that. But they consume the essence of the offering that's giving to them. So think of everything. Everything has a vibration, right? Everything has a frequency. You can measure these things. Our own heart has an electromagnetic field that it emits. So when we connect and we get in rapport with someone, when we're doing hypnotherapy or energy healing work of any kind with somebody, we're merging those heart fields. So that's what's happening. There's heart coherence happening there. So knowing this scientifically, that makes sense. We can prove that. We can measure that. So then take that aspect of vibration and frequency with food and understand that these spirits are living in a purely different vibrational spectrum than we are. So if you're offering and giving that to them, they can receive the vibrational frequency of what it is you're offering. They can consume the energy of that. So if I give a spirit an offering and it doesn't like the offering, it can take it onto the spirit planes and go barter and exchange it for something else at once. Yes, spirits do barter. That is a thing. I mean, yeah, the food it gets consumed, and then I often tell people, I'm like, well, what about all the food? Because it seems like you're wasting the food. No, I'm not. And yes, I could eat the food after I offer it, but I would not advise that because long-term consumption
Different.
of food offered to spirits creates like a type of ghost sickness, and it can actually start to eat away at you on the inside. It can make you very sick physically and induce mental insanity. But again, we're talking about long-term consumption of food offerings. If you did it once or twice, like, it's not a big deal. It actually give you great power, but I would not suggest making it a practice. Would highly suggest against that.
Wow. Just as we need to close out the show, you start breaking out with the really cool stuff, right? I've been furiously writing question after question as you're talking here, and I don't even have time to ask you any of them. Not to mention all the topics you sent me to talk about. I think we touched on maybe one of them. We never got to anything. The thing about him is that you never know where the lines are crossing, because some of the stuff he was talking about, the altar, I recognize from Wicca. I mean, there's all these different, it's a mix of modalities, which is super interesting, but really confusing because, my brain likes to compartmentalize things. Like, this is what this is, and this is what this other thing. But it's like you're melding, you're merging a lot of
reaching out and intertwining.
intertwining. Yeah, you're intertwining a lot of different practices, and that's amazingly interesting. But we just don't have enough time. You please tell me you'll come back, because we have so
I would
much
love
to
to.
talk about.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, we need to talk about some of the things we originally intended to talk about.
At the very least,
Something people were expecting to hear about.
I mean, this is absolutely fascinating, like mind-blowingly fascinating. So yeah, we've got to have you back. So thanks for being open to it. Again, if someone wants to reach out to you to take classes from you or to ask you questions and things like that, what's the best way for someone to do that?
That would be going to my website, which is the sadhudah.com, and that's www.thesadhudah.com, SADHUDAH.
Okay, I will put that on our direct show notes link so that you can actually go to our show notes and click on that, and it'll take you directly to his website. I strongly urge you, if anything in this conversation has resonated with you, this gentleman is truly remarkable. I am in awe. I'm absolutely in awe. So Sadhu Dah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Karen, thanks for
Just sitting here and listening and saying nothing.
no, thanks for experiencing this with me.
It has been fantastic.
It's been a true experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I need to go get a drink or something. And I definitely want to thank the listener for coming along on this journey of discovery, because this has been super interesting and enlightening and fascinating. Hey, we'd love to continue our conversation with you on Facebook and Instagram, so please feel free to find us there under @Skeptic Metaphysician. You can always go to skepticmetaphysician.com. We have all of our direct links there. All of our social media platforms are linked. We'll also have our guests' website linked there. But you can also leave us a review and a voicemail directly on that site. So it's super easy. And as always, if you know someone that would benefit from hearing the messages we've shared on this show or any of our others, I hope you'll consider sharing us with that person. It will help grow the show and may just help someone else come to terms with the fact that there is so much more to this reality than we are really aware of. Now, if you missed any of our show today, don't worry. All of our shows, you can find them all on skepticmetaphysician.com. And you can become a member of the Skeptic Metaphysician community there for free and enjoy the added benefits of discounts from some of our past guests on their services, as well as a chance to never miss a show immediately once it's been published. So there's that plus. Karen, thanks so much for coming on the show with me today. Again, this was a fun one.
It was awesome.
Yeah, and I hope you, listener, have enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Sadly, that is all the time that we have for now. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysician. Until then, take care.